said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Be water, my friend. Millions of people have heard those 4 words. They've been printed on posters, repeated in motivational speeches, quoted by athletes, CEOs, actors, and millions of people searching for inspiration. But here's the question almost nobody asks. Why did Bruce Lee say it? Not what it means. Why did those words become his philosophy? Because the truth is, Bruce Lee didn't invent this idea during a peaceful meditation. It wasn't born inside a beautiful temple. It wasn't even created after one of his famous movie scenes. It was forged through pain, humiliation, cultural conflict, and one experience that completely changed the way he saw martial arts forever. In the next few minutes, you'll discover the forgotten events behind Bruce Lee's most famous quote, how ancient Kung Fu shaped his mind, why he abandoned many traditional techniques, and why one of the greatest martial artists in history believed that becoming formless was the ultimate form of strength. But before Bruce Lee became Bruce Lee, he was simply a young boy, constantly getting into trouble. Hong Kong, 1940. A city recovering from war. Crowded streets, political uncertainty, neighborhood rivalries. It wasn't the glamorous Hong Kong people imagine today. It was rough. And in those streets, young Bruce Lee learned something long before he learned philosophy. If you couldn't defend yourself, someone else would decide your future. Bruce grew up surrounded by constant street fights, not because he wanted fame, not because he enjoyed violence, but because violence was simply part of growing up where he lived. Yet something interesting happened. Despite winning many fights, he kept losing something much bigger: control. Every fight made him stronger, but it also made him angrier. And his parents noticed it. They feared that one day, his temper would destroy his future. So they made a decision, one that would quietly change martial arts history forever. They sent Bruce Lee to study under one of the most respected Kung Fu masters in Hong Kong, a man named Ip Man. At first, Bruce believed he was finally going to learn how to defeat everyone. Instead, he was about to discover that Kung Fu had almost nothing to do with defeating other people, and everything to do with defeating yourself. But here's something most documentaries rarely mention. Bruce Lee's training wasn't smooth, not even close. Because inside the Wing Chun school, not everyone wanted him there. Some senior students refused to train with him. Why? The answer had nothing to do with his talent, and everything to do with something Bruce couldn't control: his ancestry. Bruce Lee was of mixed Eurasian heritage. At the time, some traditional martial artists believed that certain Kung Fu knowledge should never be taught to someone who wasn't considered fully Chinese. Imagine that, a teenager, desperate to learn, being rejected by the very people who were supposed to teach him. Many would have quit. Many would have become bitter. Bruce did neither. Instead, he watched, he listened, he adapted. Without realizing it, Bruce Lee was already becoming like water. And yet, the greatest lesson Ip Man ever gave Bruce wasn't a punch, it wasn't a kick, it wasn't even a technique. It was an idea so simple that Bruce Lee would spend the rest of his life trying to explain it to the world. But before that lesson could fully take shape, Bruce would enter a fight that exposed the biggest weakness in traditional Kung Fu. And that single fight would eventually lead to the birth of Jeet Kune Do. But that story begins with a challenge nobody expected. By the early 1960s, Bruce Lee had already moved to the United States. He wasn't a movie star. He wasn't famous. In fact, he was simply a young martial artist with an idea that many people considered unacceptable. Bruce believed Kung Fu shouldn't belong to one race, one family, or one secret society. If someone truly wanted to learn, they deserved to learn. That belief earned him admiration, but it also earned him powerful enemies. Because to some traditional masters, Bruce Lee had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. Then came the challenge. One man, one fight, and a disagreement that would quietly change martial arts forever. That man was Wong Jack Man. Even today, people still argue about what really happened inside that room. Some say Bruce dominated, others tell a different story. But there's one fact that almost every serious account agrees on. Bruce Lee won, yet he wasn't satisfied, not even close. Why? Because the fight lasted much longer than he expected. His opponent kept moving, kept escaping, kept forcing Bruce to chase him. When it was finally over, Bruce wasn't celebrating. He was frustrated, exhausted, disappointed with himself. Most people think winning proves you're right. Bruce Lee thought differently. To him, winning wasn't enough. Efficiency mattered more than victory. He began asking himself questions that very few martial artists were willing to ask. Why did I get tired? Why did I need so many movements? Why did it take so long? And perhaps the biggest question of all, what if tradition itself was holding me back? That single question would change everything. Bruce returned home, not to celebrate, but to rethink everything he had ever learned. For weeks, he analyzed every movement, every mistake, every hesitation, every unnecessary technique. He wasn't trying to become stronger. He was trying to become simpler, faster, more direct. Because in his mind, combat wasn't about performing beautiful techniques. It was about solving a problem, using the shortest path possible. This was the moment when Bruce Lee slowly began breaking away from the rigid structure of traditional styles. Not because he disrespected Kung Fu, far from it. He respected it so deeply that he refused to let it become a prison. He once compared fixed styles to trying to trap flowing water inside a box. The box stays the same, but water never does. And that's when something extraordinary happened. Bruce stopped asking, which style is the best? Instead, he started asking, what actually works? That simple shift became the foundation of everything that followed. But here's what almost nobody realizes. The famous phrase, "Be water, my friend," didn't begin as a philosophical quote. It began inside a training room, covered in sweat, surrounded by failed techniques and countless experiments. Bruce Lee wasn't trying to sound wise. He was trying to solve a problem, and the answer was hidden inside something every person on Earth touches every single day: water. Watch water carefully. It never argues with a rock. It never fights a wall. It doesn't waste energy trying to prove its strength. It simply adapts. If there's an opening, it flows. If there's pressure, it changes shape. If there's no path, it creates one. Bruce realized that nature had already perfected what martial artists were still trying to invent. The greatest fighter wouldn't be the strongest or the fastest. It would be the one who could adapt before anyone else. From that point on, his training changed completely. He borrowed techniques from boxing, footwork from fencing, timing from Western sports, conditioning methods that many traditional schools ignored. To some people, this looked like betrayal. To Bruce, it looked like evolution, because he believed something that still challenges martial artists today. Absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own. Those weren't just words. They became the blueprint for a new martial art. Jeet Kune Do. Not another style, but almost the absence of style. And yet, there was still one question Bruce Lee hadn't answered. If becoming like water was the key to fighting, could the same idea transform an entire life? Because over the next few years, Bruce Lee would face challenges that no martial arts technique could solve. Hollywood rejection, serious injury, relentless criticism, and a battle with his own body that nearly ended everything. Ironically, those moments outside the dojo would teach him more about being water than any fight ever could. And that's where the story becomes truly unforgettable. Bruce Lee had learned how to fight. He had challenged tradition. He had created a philosophy unlike anything martial arts had seen before. But life was about to ask him a question that no punch, no kick, and no fighting style could answer. What happens when you can no longer fight? In 1970, Bruce Lee suffered one of the most devastating setbacks of his life. During a weight training session, he seriously injured his back. The damage was severe. Doctors warned him that he might never practice martial arts the same way again. Some even believed he would never perform at a high level. For a man whose entire identity revolved around movement, those words were crushing. Imagine hearing that the one thing you've dedicated your life to may be gone forever. For many people, that would have been the end of the story. But not for Bruce Lee, because this was the exact moment when be water stopped being a philosophy and became a way of living. Unable to train the way he once had, Bruce adapted. He studied, he wrote, he reflected, he read philosophy, psychology, human movement, biomechanics. He filled notebooks with ideas, not because he had to, but because his mind refused to stop growing. While his body healed, his understanding evolved. Bruce realized something profound. Sometimes moving forward doesn't mean moving faster. Sometimes it means changing direction, just like water. And yet, his greatest battle still wasn't over. Because recovering from injury was one thing, proving himself to the world was something else entirely. Hollywood wasn't waiting for Bruce Lee. Hollywood doubted him. Studio executives couldn't imagine an Asian actor leading a major action film. Again and again, doors closed. Again and again, he was underestimated. Again and again, people tried to fit him into someone else's idea of who he should be. But water doesn't force open a closed door. It finds another way. Bruce returned to Hong Kong. There, the audience saw what Hollywood couldn't. Films like The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon didn't just become successful. They changed action cinema forever. Only then did Hollywood finally begin paying attention. And when Enter the Dragon was released, Bruce Lee wasn't simply starring in a movie. He was introducing an entirely new philosophy to the world. Not through speeches, not through books, but through movement. Every step, every pause, every strike carried the same message: adapt, flow, never become trapped by your own limits. Here's what's remarkable: more than 50 years after his passing, people still quote, "Be water, my friend." Athletes repeat it before competitions. Entrepreneurs use it in business. Military leaders have referenced it. Psychologists have discussed its connection to resilience. Even people who have never watched a Bruce Lee film know those 4 words. But very few know the journey behind them. Now you do. Because Be Water was never about becoming soft. Water can be gentle enough to nourish life, or powerful enough to carve canyons through solid rock. It doesn't choose one forever. It becomes whatever the moment requires. That was Bruce Lee's lesson. Strength without flexibility eventually breaks. Skill without adaptation eventually becomes outdated. Knowledge without growth eventually becomes limitation. Maybe that's why Bruce Lee continues to inspire people across generations. Not because he was unbeatable, not because he was perfect, but because he never stopped learning, never stopped questioning, never stopped evolving. He wasn't chasing the title of the greatest martial artist. He was chasing the next version of himself. And perhaps that's a fight all of us understand. So the next time life refuses to follow your plans, when opportunities disappear, when people underestimate you, or when the path ahead suddenly changes, remember what Bruce Lee discovered after years of struggle, years of rejection, years of pain, and years of relentless self-improvement. Don't resist every obstacle. Don't become trapped inside one way of thinking. Flow around it. Learn from it. adapt to it. Because water never complains about the shape of the river. It simply keeps moving. Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. When you pour water into a cup, it becomes the cup. When you pour water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend. Those words weren't simply spoken by Bruce Lee. They were earned. Through every setback, every challenge, every fight, and every moment, he chose to adapt instead of surrender. Perhaps that is why they still echo around the world today. If Bruce Lee's story changed the way you think about strength, resilience, or growth, let us know in the comments. What does be water mean to you? And if you enjoyed this journey into the philosophy behind one of history's most influential martial artists, don't forget to subscribe, because some of the greatest life lessons are hidden inside the stories we think we already know. Until next time, keep learning, keep adapting, and above all, be water, my friend.